Good to be here. 13 Russians have been indicted by special counsel Robert Mueller for interfering in the 2016 election.
Documents say the effort involved unwitting Americans, including Trump campaign officials. And on the same day, the special counsel responds to a request by former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort.
Now, Manafort wanted a change in his bail terms. Instead, he got a filing from Robert Mueller showing what the DOJ says is evidence of criminal conduct and bank fraud.
Well, joining us now to discuss all of this, Juana Summers, CNN politics senior writer, and CNN political commentators Jack Kingston and David Swirlick. I guess, Juana, we could start with you. This news on Manafort, I mean, what do you make about these developments now? We know that new allegations from Mueller concerning Manafort. How significant is this?
We're still figuring out a lot of the details here, Renee. What we know is that Robert Mueller's office told a federal judge that it found evidence that Paul Manafort, the former campaign chairman, committed bank fraud that was not addressed by that indictment last October. This comes, of course, as there's legal wrangling over a $10 million bail package for Paul Manafort. So still trying to figure out exactly what has happened here. Some of the details of those documents released by the special counsel yesterday also kind of give a hint that there may have been someone other than Manafort involved in this. We don't know who that person was. So our team's still trying to learn just how big of a deal this will be and what will happen with that underlying bail deal that's still being negotiated.
All right, let's turn to Jack. Jack, I'm coming to you about this indictment of these 13 Russians, and I jotted down something that H.R. McMaster, National Security Advisor, said about this indictment and what it does now. It says it now makes the evidence incontrovertible and apparent to everyone that Russia meddled. Apparent to everyone, including the man who called it a hoax, a witch hunt, fake news, a made-up story about the Democrats to cover up Hillary Clinton's loss?
You know, I think the president probably will make a definitive statement to the degree that they were absolutely interfering, and I think that we should not focus on that as much as the outrageous fact that they did interfere, you know, not just through these three companies, but think about 80 employees who worked full-time to spy on us and to interrupt us and to meddle and go far beyond that in the election. I think that's where the focus needs to be. And I'm going to grant all the Trump critics, if you want to focus on the fact that the president did not, wasn't strong enough about this in terms of what their interference was, I would give that to you. But on the other hand, I would also say to the people who for over a year now have said the Trump campaign was involved in and they were up to their neck in collusion, I think it's time for those critics to also say perhaps we were wrong about this and that the Russian interference was aimed at all campaigns. It was aimed at America in general in terms of creating chaos and disruption.
Okay, well, several things there. This doesn't speak specifically to collusion. So that part of the investigation continues on the sideline, probably the main line. This is another element. But Jack, when you say that, you know, people should move on from highlighting that the president didn't acknowledge the involvement of Russia, the president was briefed on this a year ago. Not this specific element or these 13 Russians, I don't mean to say, but he was briefed on the involvement of Russians 13 months ago.
Okay, then, Victor, it's got to be fair game to talk about the October 22nd, 2012 criticism by Barack Obama of Romney when he mocked Romney for saying that Russia was a geo-global threat.
Not relevant at all.
Absolutely it's relevant because, again, in August of 2016, Barack Obama was warned that Russia was interfering in the election. And in September at the G7 summit, all he did, and he admitted this, he told Vladimir Putin, y'all better cut this out. I mean,
you bring up an October 2012 debate on an indictment that starts in 2014, April of 2014.
Under his watch. Under his watch.
Hold on.
Yeah, just one point to Congressman Kingston's statement there. Look, I think it is fair game to criticize President Obama and the Obama administration for any response to Russian meddling in the election in 2016. They were in charge of the intelligence apparatus. Going back to 2012, though, one, that was a debate, not an intelligence operation. Number two, remember that it was in 2014 that Russia invaded Crimea, and the president's response was to huddle with Chancellor Merkel, was to huddle with other European and Canadian leaders and put tough sanctions in place on Russia. When the rubber met the road, Obama did have a robust response to the Russians, and I think that speaks more to the issue than these sort of talking points about whether or not the administration said something in a debate in 2012.
David, I want to pick up on what Jack just said here. I mean, he said, don't pay attention to the fact that the president didn't believe that this Russia investigation was credible. What do you make of that, considering, we just heard the head of the FBI saying that the president has not directly asked the FBI to look into Russian meddling, considering the president last month didn't take the opportunity to add more sanctions onto Russia. How is it fair to say, let's look away, let's move on? I mean, this is the president of the United States.
No, that's a good point, Renee. No. So again, I think Congressman Kingston is half right in what he was saying a moment ago. There's nothing in what we found out yesterday that's a smoking gun that says, aha, Trump and his inner circle was in cahoots with the Russians. But on the other hand, the president's tweet that says, oh, look, no collusion, nothing to see here, that hasn't been established either. To your point about sanctions, there is still this big question hanging out there at the 50,000-foot level, Renee, about why President Trump has been so solicitous of the Russians. That's one question. There's another question about Russian interference that was reported out yesterday in that indictment from the special counsel. And then there's a separate question about some of the folks in Trump's inner circle that we just still don't have the answer to yet.
David, and then there is the major question about the dossier and how much the Clinton campaign worked with Russian operatives to get information for that dossier, and how much this dossier has been used to drive a wedge in the American political system. And so I think that's a very legitimate question. I'm going to agree with you on most of what you've said, by the way, but I would also put Uranium One in the mix in terms of what were the Clintons doing, and why did Bill Clinton get paid $500,000 for right at the wake of a CFIUS approval? I mean, just legit questions. If it's good for the goose, good for the gander, let's all Democrats and Republicans put everything on the table.
Congressman, I agree with you. What's good for the goose is good for the sauce, and I think it's fair to talk about what was in that dossier. But what's in the dossier doesn't change all the other things that are being investigated by the special counsel, by the congressional committees. And I think that when you start to reach down to that level, when you start to reach down to Uranium One, it's less about what was going on with the Trump campaign and more about what's going on with the Clinton campaign, which should be looked into, but is a separate issue.
Let me get to, before you respond, Jack, let me get to Juana, and not just looking back over the last 4 years here, but ahead to the midterms that are just a couple of months away. I mean, we're just a month